Today's talk was about it's not just the cattle you're being managed anymore. One of the things that you need to remember is that you're going to pursue niche markets. You need to understand all the certifications and validations that you need to attain. Niche markets are not for everyone, but if you want to go down that path, pursue it 100% and make sure you understand the cost and values added to it in order for you to capture the maximum return. If you do decide to go down an alternative path, some of the benefits is that you'll have an increase in market options. You can stay at the local level, you can go to the national or international levels, but you have to make sure you understand the complexities of these markets and that you have a complete vertical coordination with your endpoint market. Some of the pitfalls of choosing an alternative market is that you may not be a large enough operation. The consumer demand may create a big farming operation again, and you may not have enough cattle. So perhaps you may need to get with your neighbor in order to achieve the desirable number. Also, there's added costs and certifications that are not free, and they do cost a lot of time and effort in order to maintain. Cattle and Feeders has developed Canadian Platinum beef as an alternative market to reach borders outside our own province. The difference here is that we have aligned ourselves with the proper vendors. We are able to reach other alternatives such as halal markets, rectopamine-free, and 100% natural. However, it is not 100% of our demand in local beef consumption. This has given us other alternatives, and it allows for better commodity pricing. At Cattle and Feeders, we have decided to go down this path. We developed Canadian Platinum beef as an alternative to non-conventional beef production. We offer halal, rectopamine-free, and 100% natural beef. It's allowed us to enter markets that we never anticipated before. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank Lifestyle Gentic for inviting me again. In the past, I have spoken a lot about the work that we do and the genomics, all the research and things like that, but the reality of it is all the headaches behind the scenes, behind the curtain. So that's what we're going to focus on right now, because it's no longer just a cattle that you're being managed. It used to be a simple thing that, how do you start managing a feedlot? You think it would just be easy. You buy the cattle, you get them in, you process, you vaccinate them, put them on feed, get them to the right period, and then send them to slaughter and get your check. But that's no longer the issue. There are so many alternatives as to what markets you're going to choose to pursue, how are you going to get there, and all the certifications that you need to achieve in the process. So we're no longer doing contracts. Cattle feeding has become purchase order driven for us. There's a constant supply, and anticipated sales are the norm. And we must have a ready supply of cattle ready. I grew up, again, in Texas, where your word was worth its weight in gold, and up here, that's no longer the case. You can no longer just say, yeah, my cattle didn't receive an antibiotic. You have to be able to prove it. No, that's right, I didn't feed them any ionophores. Well, how do you prove that? So being a scout is no longer just enough. We have to prove your claims. Our facilities and staff need numerous certifications, validations, audits to maintain our claims. We get audited every 6 months in order to stay certified for specific claims. Others are every 3 years. Others are annual basis. We got more acronyms that we can care of, and I think the only one I'm glad that we don't have is STD. So we are GAP Canada certified. We are GAP US certified. We are CCAC certified. We are CLT certified, VVP, and certified humane. These are all the things that we do on a regular basis at our feedlot. We feed an average of 9,000 to 12,000 head of animals that fall under something else other than a conventional program. The different options that we have is 100% natural, EU approved, rectopamine free, and halal certified.
So we do a whole bunch of different work. We brought these guys in because the one thing that we needed to do is that we need them to understand that there's no longer a disconnect between the cow-calf producer, the feedlot, and the endpoint. What they do at the ranch is going to impact that animal for the rest of its life until it reaches your plate. Cattleland, who are we? We are a complex enterprise of companies and a research facility. We currently employ 58 people full-time at the feedlot with a variety of tasks and duties to perform. Again, we are CCAC certified, GAP USA certified, GAP Canada certified, VVP, amongst many other things. We employ 2 veterinary practices because we don't trust either one. Amongst that, it's actually 6 full-time DVMs, and we also employ a nutrition service company with 2 full-time PhDs. Our cattle probably have better health care and nutrition than Obamacare can ever provide for the entire U.S. We have 2 feedlots. The main one, which you see on the picture, is a capacity of 25,000 head, and our smaller feedlot's only 9,000 head. We do have a research facility there, and we're capable of handling about 15,000 head of cattle at any one given point in a research trial facility. And amongst everything else, we have our non-conventional programs, like I mentioned earlier. So CCAP, it is a Canadian Council on Animal Care. This is an autonomous and independent body that was created in 1968 to oversee the ethical use of animals in science in Canada. As I took over the research department in 2008, one of the things that we wanted to do was increase our credibility for what we were doing. Because with credibility comes more money. We are a for-profit research facility, so we don't rely on grants and public funding. We needed to prove that the work that we did was ethical. The CCAC is registered as a nonprofit organization, and it has a lot of contributions from federal science-based departments and agencies. And it is governed by a council of representatives from 22 national organizations, which are permanent members, and up to 3 limited-term members organizations. They provide us with the assessment and certification programs. Certain things we couldn't change. For example, we had to explain to them, because we're also a commercial environment, our feed troughs could not be stainless steel, right? Laboratory animals usually have to be in a different environment. We're also a commercial feedlot, so we have to do a lot of give and take there. GAP Canada stands for Good Animal Practices. The purpose of the Canadian Council on Animal Care is to act the interest, this is regulated by CCAC, the interest of the people of Canada to ensure through programs of education, assessments, and persuasion that the use of animals where necessary for research, teaching, and testing, it employs optimal physical and psychological care according to acceptable scientific standards, and to promote an increased level of knowledge, awareness, and sensitivity to relevant ethical principles. We had to change a lot of our practices for research animals, which have led into full-time implementations over on the commercial side. For example, it used to be that only steers or animals that needed to be castrated will receive a pain medication only if they were going to be on a research trial, but commercial cattle didn't. Now it is 100% mandatory. We had to form our own internal committee of animal welfare and ethics, which is represented by 2 senior management level people, our operations representative, 1 of our processing crew, along with 1 member of academia from the University of Calgary Vet School, and also a full-time veterinary practitioner that help us advise on everything that we do. Excuse me. Our certification is every 3 years, and the keystone, again, is the local animal care committee. Everything that you do at the end of the day, it's a regulatory body. We have to get approved, whether we agree with what they have to say or not. We have to implement certain things for them. This is a lengthy process. I don't know how well you can see this, but it takes upwards of 13 to 15 months to receive this accreditation. So it's not just an overnight thing. You fill out the application, pay your dues, and off you go. You go through a round of audits, back and forth. You have to write a lot of protocols if you don't have them in place. And I'll back up about 5 years, but all this started when we first looking for alternative endpoints for our beef. And we went to China, and the Chinese said to us, it's great, we love your feedlot, we love the taste. Show us your ethics protocols for the cattle. Show us in writing how you treat the animals. And we said, well, we don't have that. I said, well, we're not going to buy your beef then. We know that you can produce good quality beef. We want to know that you're doing it ethically. So that's what started spearheading a lot of these changes. GAP USA, this is a nonprofit organization dedicated to continually improving the lives of farms and animals. It has a 5-step animal welfare rating. It actually stands for the Global Animal Partnership, which is different from the Good Animal Practices. If I had to put in my own words, this is the police department for Whole Foods Market. Okay? If you want to sell your beef to Whole Foods Market, you must be GAP approved. If you were here last year, you might remember Steve Whitmire from Brasstown Beef. He was at level 5 certified, which just blew my mind, because I don't know how you can get to that level at a commercial level like us. This is our 26-page pamphlet here, and I'm going to read to you one of the arguments that I had with the auditor when they came over. I lost my page. And these people came over from Vermont, and it was a couple, and the lady was wearing a hemp dress, and I'm not saying anything about those people, but they have never been at a feedlot larger than 100 head of cattle. And I said, well, that's a hobby farm. That's not a feedlot. And when they walked in and they saw our facility of 25,000 head, and I was trying to get a rating of step 2, and I'll show you the ratings later on. And one of the things here, it says, animals must be provided with objects on which to scratch or groom. And I said, well, you don't have post scratchers for them. I said, well, they're not freaking cats. And I said, they rob themselves on each other. They rob themselves on the fence. They rob themselves on the feed bunks. And said, no, you need to provide something that is a permanent structure for them to go and scratch themselves on. I said, well, I can't do that because once it snows and we go in there and scrape the manure, I'm going to break that. Oh, we never really thought about that. And then they say, okay, well, the other option is that you need to provide enough shade, like an awning, to provide shade for 50% of the sunlight to cover 100% of the population in the pen. And I wanted to say a number of things, but I said, well, that would make a lot of sense if we were back in Texas, but now that I've experienced the Canadian winters, we actually want sunlight up here. What happens if we get a snowstorm and this awning collapses and kills all the cattle that you want me to protect? And she said, well, I never really thought about that. And I said, well, maybe, I don't know what kind of genius created all these things, but maybe you should take regionality into consideration with all these things that you do. But the bottom line is that we do get paid more, so therefore we did it. But we got a level 1, which is the bare minimum, and that's as far as we're willing to go. You need to have a plans for everything, and because we had all of our protocols from the research facility and everything else, it was easier for us to manipulate and things change over. But there is absolutely no regionality to this. The Rent and Ranch farm plan must exist. For us, if we're not feeding our feedlot at 100% natural, we need to show physically and on paper how we're going to identify and segregate the cattle. We had to install Texas gates and remote gates like the ones that you see at parking lots in order to separate the trucks and which feed truck can enter what area. Only those trucks that are designated as the hormone-free truck are the ones that have the access and the code, like a garage door opener, to go in there. At the end of the day, we also have to be able to lock these areas and segregate the cattle so that if they do get out of their bunks and areas, they only have access to their own feed. It must be current and updated, or it must address all relevant areas covered by the standards. And you also must reflect the changes that you're trying to put on paper. You can't just say, well, this is how we're going to do it. You have to implement it. They come, They do have unannounced visits, and they're checking up on you. That's why I say they're like the police department of Whole Foods. Here's the 5 steps. Number 1 is no crowding, which being a feedlot, that's a very big challenge. We had to reduce our head numbers per pen in order to meet what they decided was the average number of cattle that we should place on a per bunk pace. We were basing it on the fact that we're feeding 2 to 3 times a day, so therefore the cattle rotate. You can put more cattle in there. They don't care about that. They measure the pen space, and the pen space is what decides what the number of cattle going in there. The rest of them, you can look them up. It's all on the web. I'm not going to bother explaining. They don't have a step 3 for whatever reason. Number 6, which is animals center entire life on same farm. These animals will never be castrated. They'll never be branded. They have to have fence line weaning. They go from the same farm, and they have to be able to walk over to the abattoir. That's how it has to be done. So unless you're completely vertically integrated, I don't know how that's going to happen at a larger commercial level. Verified beef production, which is Canada's verified on-farm feed safety for program beef. To me, this is probably the best thing out there for Canada. It does ensure that you don't have things like broken needle in the cattle, that you're actually doing your vaccinations properly, that you teach people how to handle a cattle prod, that you teach them how to handle the flight zones, things like that. But unfortunately, you don't get any money for this. You do get money for the other ones, but not for this one. The European Union is by far the biggest importer of food worldwide. The rules for meat and meat productions are fully harmonized, and the EU Commission acts as a competent authority on behalf of the 25 members of the European states. And the EU Commission is the sole negotiator. What they expect is full transparency on animal health, production, the environment, and the animal welfare. The exporting countries must have a competent veterinary authority which is responsible throughout the food chain. And the authorities must be empowered, structure, and resource implement effective inspection and guarantee credible certifications. But our EU exports, and when I say EU exports, I'm kind of tying all the non-conventional cattle in here, okay? Excuse me. We are the largest finishing feedlot certified in Canada, and that's because we got the entire feedlot approved. So we're capable of feeding all 25,000 head as EU. We actually feed what's called a natural, 100% natural program, which meets and exceeds all the regulations expected by the EU. That means the animal has never received an antibiotic in its entire life. It will never have any feed additives, and no implants and no beta agonists. It does cost you, so it takes about almost 2 points higher in conversion. Cattle take about anywhere from 60, 90 days longer, and it's more expensive. We created Canadian Platinum Beef because everything that we do there, if there's 100% natural, they get sick. Now they're treated, they go into the EU program. They still stay non-implanted, and then they can fall into the ractopamine-free export and also the halal beef, because our other exports don't really care a whole lot about primes and triple A's, as more as just single A's. So a lot of our cattle just kind of fall down into all these other programs, and halal really is just more of the way that they're slaughtered. This is Damien Mason. Here's one quote that I really like is, when Ford Motor Company or Apple Computer produce more product with less resources for less money is a positive thing. But when agriculture does the same thing, opponents scream factory farm, right? And that's when you start taking all the technologies that we have, such as beta agonists, implants, antibiotics. You know, the more demand for this type of product is actually creating the factory farm all over again, and the little guys are not going to be able to keep up with larger organizations. So, in closing, pioneer steak harrows. I've always said that smaller operations are kind of limited to what they're able to do. The producer does dictate their own mega farm, whether they like to admit it or not. More options just means more work. Niche markets are not for everyone, but if you can, just find your own place. And credits, for the most part, the internet. Okay, so you can find it all there. Thank you.